Hi honey bunnies, welcome to my altar. I've invited you here today to talk about something very specific, which you already know from the title is basically just an exploration of the use of an altar for shadow work. I have personally noticed a theme of healing videos going around in the community at the moment, and just discussions online and in the witchy and spiritual communities about the value of healing and about what it really means to heal and what the process is actually like. And I can definitely say this hugely resonates with me at the moment. I am just beginning, tentatively beginning, a huge journey of healing. And I think Joey Morris got it so right in her video that she made recently, where she talks about how healing is really tough and really dark and can be really fucking twisted, and definitely doesn't often marry up to and mirror with these kind of like fluffy, angelic, like white light vibes, guys, kind of images that sometimes do the rounds when we talk about healing, when we talk about it as a practice and as a focus for magic and as a focus for ritual and so on. And I totally go with that 100%. Healing is ugly as fuck, and it's something that I have to be dragged kicking and screaming to do. There are so many reasons for this, you know. When you know that you're at the beginning of a healing journey and you know that you need to start to release and to process the emotion and to go through the whole gamut of emotions, a lot of the time you don't want to begin that process because you don't want to look at your own accountability, and you don't want to look at where you may have been perpetuating the cycle that got you into the situation in the first place. You perhaps do not want to look at how deeply the other person has betrayed or humiliated you, or how badly you feel about the disappointment you've experienced, whatever your personal situation is. It can be really difficult to look something in the face and look at it for what it is. And I definitely think that another big reason why so many people resist beginning the journey of healing is because it involves accepting that you need to release, that you need to surrender, that you need to let it go. And actually, a lot of the time, when you've been harmed, when you've been wronged, when you've been betrayed, when you've been manipulated, when you have been dismissed, overlooked, or silenced in some way, you don't want to let go of those feelings of anger and those feelings of self-righteous, absolutely righteous, absolutely superior fury and anger and spite sometimes, and malice. You know, you kind of want to stay there. That almost seems easier and more reasonable and more logical to process than the other stuff that comes afterwards. So I sometimes think a healing journey is a journey which begins with you saying, I'm ready to process what is beyond these surface feelings of fury and rage and feeling disgusted at the other person and judging the other person. I'm ready to go further, I'm ready to go deeper, and I'm ready to cleanse and restore. It's really difficult to have that conversation with yourself and to make that bargain with yourself. It's incredibly difficult to do. So I think there are a whole host of reasons why healing is not easy. And on top of that, you've got, you know, the conditioning that you experienced during your childhood and adolescence, and you know, what you learned about emotional intelligence, about the healing process, about recovery, about being honest about how you feel, about allowing yourself to hold space for your own emotions. Many people have experienced a lack of those kinds of things, a lack of that kind of guidance. They did not have those kinds of messages from their parental figures growing up. They were not taught how to deal with their emotions. They were not taught that it is okay to undergo a healing process, that it's okay to feel the whole range of emotion that a human being is capable of feeling. Many people did not have space held for them when they were growing up, and they very much took on the shadows of their parents, who themselves did not allow themselves to deal with their own, you know, emotions and go into their own healing journey. So you're dealing as well with family dynamics and the conditioning that comes from long ago, and trying to break that down in the process so that you can actually get on with the business of healing, which is not something that you have necessarily been taught to do. I wrote something on Facebook a few days ago that I noted was appreciated by a great deal of people and shared by a great many people, and kind of made a big impact, and I can totally understand why in hindsight it made such a big impact. And I'm going to read it to you now because I feel like it taps into the theme of doing shadow work at the altar, doing shadow work in sacred space, and matching your shadow work up to your spiritual experiences and your spiritual intentions. There is room for my anger at the altar. There is time for my frustration, my confusion, my resentment. I can hash it out at the altar. I can absolutely let that shit come forth. I can give it expression, give it some room to move around. I let my altar bear the brunt of the bullshit, and I let it be the place from which the solutions can be born. It's not the altar itself, which is the place of power. It's just a marker, a place to set sacred space, a place to birth the circle and let the circle birth me. But it's my point of inspiration. It's an artistic depiction of what's necessary to me, what I'm trying to call in, and what matters in my psyche at any given moment. It's a reminder to come home to myself. The emotions which feel intensely negative are the ones which need to be swaddled and laid there just as much as any others. I witch my way through epic layers of shit. Let's be clear, for me, everything belongs in the circle. All of it. When things are shitty, I know that I can only create a shiny new situation and transport myself there if I am willing to fully confront the ugliness of the situation I am experiencing in the present. For me, quite often, the altar is the absolute starting point when I'm right at the beginning of accepting something, realising something, healing from something, or even just beginning to process that beginning phase of fury, anger, frustration, release, the expression of those primal forms of emotion. When I'm confused, when I'm lost, when I don't know where else to go, when I don't know where to start, when I don't even know whether or not I want to start, I come to the altar and I hit the fucking pillow, I hit my knees, I light those candles, I get that incense burning, and even if I have no clear idea in mind of what I actually am going to do, even if I'm not going to do a ritual, I'm not going to do a devotional to my matron, I'm not necessarily going to do spell work or release work or any of that stuff, because I'm so confused, because I'm so fraught with emotion, because I don't yet have a plan, right? I do not yet have a plan. You know that feeling when you're just a mess? To me, the altar is the starting point. It is the absolute beginning. A plan starts to formulate once I sit with my centre, my axis mundi. Okay, I was trying to think of a way to explain what I mean, and I was reading the sacred history last night, how angels, mystics and higher intelligence made our world. If you're into fairy tales, if you're into mythology, if you love Joseph Campbell, read the sacred history, it's the mutt's nuts. But anyways, so I was reading this last night, and this kind of explains what the use of an altar does for me as an individual. And this is just for me as a witch, okay? Nobody else needs to follow suit. If you do not have an altar, if you cannot currently have an altar, if you have a small altar and cannot have an altar of this size and magnitude, that's totally fine. You do your own thing, you're on your own journey. But I just want to explain what it feels like for me having the altar as a starting point for any deep down, low, dark, hideous and dirty shit that I need to deal with. Oh, I love the smell of books so much. It just makes me weep. It's the joy of it. Oh God, it's overwhelming, isn't it? So I was reading about the story of Socrates and the oracle at Delphi and all this other ancient Greek grooviness. And without going into lots of context and lots of explanation, if you just take a look at this image here, which is an image of an object which was present at Delphi at a certain time in ancient Greece. And the object is called the omphalos. I really hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. In Greek thought, Apollo was the logos, or word, the source of the world's harmony, weaving in eternal song all that is and will be. The most sacred thing at Delphi was the omphalos stone that marked the centre of the world and the place where all worlds meet. This stone was covered by a net mathematically generated by the numbers of the gods' names. This net depicted the world's soul. It caught the thoughts or ideas of the great cosmic mind and pulled them into the material world. We each have a sacred centre like this in our body. That's why the altar is the starting point for me, because it connects me to my sense of myself as a witch, which is my most sacred, my most empowered archetype, the archetype with the most direction behind it, the archetype that brings me home to my own empowerment, to my own inner wisdom, to my own ability to deal with the situation. Therefore, if I'm lost, if I'm confused, if I don't know what the fuck is going on, where I'm been, where I'm going, and I feel like everything and everyone has somehow been a lie and I just do not have any direction, then the altar is the place to go first, even just to collect my thoughts. I don't need to do any workings. Sometimes that's not the point. Sometimes that is really not the point. It's so much more raw than that, and that's what the altar is in part designed for, I think, is to tune you in, to give you that very first reminder, that very first memo that you need when the brown stuff hits the big whirly thing. And the memo is this: you are a witch. You are a witch. Start there, start from that point. By the way, I am completely aware that the lighting in this video is shit and I could totally turn the lights on or turn some lamps on or something, but I choose not to. I felt like this was the way that this video needed to be done, so there we are there. So in the Facebook status, I talked about anger at the altar and frustration at the altar and how my altar bears the brunt of the bullshit. I feel like altars, sacred space, time to be a witch and time to connect with what that archetype means and what it means on a practical level, whether you have an altar or not, whether you have any kind of sacred setup or not, whether you just have one object that clicks you into a moment to be a witch and to be everything that that word means and describes. Whatever the setup is for you, I feel like the anger, the frustration, the stress, the confusion, the absolute loss, the epitome of disappointment, that low, that real fucking low that's lower than you've ever been before, all of those things should not be devoid from or divorced from what it means to be a witch and what it means to be in sacred space and to make something happen, even if all you're making happen is that you're crying your fucking guts out and you have no idea where to go from there. I feel like sacred space, the altar, anything that connects me to my sense of myself as having a deep connection with the archetype of the witch is a good, sturdy starting point. Things begin to come together from that moment, and I don't push it. I have no real expectation for it. It's not something that I demand of or that I put pressure on. It's just a place that I need to be in order to let go. You know, it's kind of like how you would, you know, wait to process your emotions until you're with a close friend or an advisor that you trust, you know, or it's like you'll wait to process certain issues until you're with your counsellor who already knows the backstory and already knows kind of how you feel about things, or whatever it is. You might wait to discuss a certain problem with a partner. Sometimes I feel that the most sacred and the most obvious and the most effective place from which to begin an exploration is my altar. It's in my witchy being. And no, I don't need my altar. And I think this is something that sadly, when witches talk about altars and tools and sacred spaces and setups and all the stuff that they've done to create a practice which is sturdy and consistent and works for them, I think it's sad that over and over again, I think witches are going to have to explain, like, as a caveat, let me just say, you know, I know this is all physical shit and doesn't mean anything. How can you say Sue Catwoman doesn't mean anything? That's grotesque. How dare you? I think it's sad that I have to give that caveat, but let me just give that caveat. I can witch myself through epic layers of shit, anywhere in the world, any time zone, anywhere, any place, anyhow. I'm absolutely secure in my ability as a witch, in my position as a witch. I'm secure in it, and I know that I have done great things for myself and manifested great things for myself and recognised great things for myself and owned great things for myself without being at the altar, without having the candles lit, without actually going through the business of creating sacred space. I've definitely done that, and I am a witch all the time, 24/7, and I think a lot of us would say that. But I feel like when you have to do such deep work that you know is rooted in the majesty of what it means to burn in agonizing fucking pain, then, you know, for me, then it really, really works best if I'm at my altar, if I'm alone at my altar and I'm in the circle. I've said in a previous video that to me, the circle is like the womb. The circle is the alpha and omega. The circle is the beginning, the end, the everything, the all, the all. And I feel like I can be born inside the circle, and I feel like I can be messy inside the circle. I feel like I can slither out of myself covered in blood and amniotic fluid, newborn, having realised that everything I thought just a few hours ago was a lie, and I've no idea where I am, and I can't walk, and I can't even open my eyes yet. When I feel that brand new and that vulnerable and that open to attack, when I feel like nowhere else in the world is right and nowhere feels like home to me, I carve out that sacred shit and I am fucking home. I am back in Kansas, Toto. The point that I'm trying to make is this: I cry in the circle. I really do. I'm gonna cry in the circle tonight, you know. This is gonna be a heavy, heavy new moon ritual for me tonight. I know it. I know it. I have healing to do too, honestly. The last couple of months have been interesting, and I know that For me, like being a witch and doing your thing, recognising the Sabbats or the Esberts, or working with a matron or patron, working with spirit, working with guides, anything that you can do as a witch, focusing on ecology, focusing on the plight of the planet, connecting to the seasons and the cycles of the seasons and all that kind of thing, anything that you consider to be part of your practice. For me, that stuff that I do, that marks my progression as a witch and marks my willingness to learn and to partake in what it means for me to have a spiritual practice, that is the stuff that I look forward to in terms of releasing and surrendering and realising and owning up to and shadow working and all of that good stuff. I mean, some of the realisations that I have in sacred space and in the midst of ritual are absolutely seminal. They're matchless. They're fucking matchless. And I really feel like, you know, when I know that a new moon is coming and I'm really going to have that intense communion with my matron deity, and like my new moon rituals are set up to commune with my matron deity particularly, and the aspect of the dark goddess as a more general rule, I really feel like that's my time. It's just like waiting for a counselling session. It's just like having that trusted advisor that is sage and wise, and that you kind of think to yourself, oh, I really, really want to muddle through the complexity of this and get some answers and help myself to understand the answers that are already within me. I just can't wait for next Monday when I'll have that session with my counsellor. It's just like that. It's like, God, the moon is going to be dark soon and I'm really going to get into some shit. And do you need to wait for the next point on the lunar phase? No, absolutely not. I've been doing work most days on this stuff that includes some kind of spiritual focus, but there will always be these key points that I know are set up more in my own psychology and within the energies of the universe to hold space for shadow work to be done, and to hold space for the vastness of the realizations that I need and that I so desire to come to me and to be processed. And for me, the new moon is a key time for that, a classic time for that. And so I'm excited. I'm also fearful. I'm preparing for it. I've been preparing for it for the last few days, and I've been preparing my altar for it as well. And for me, it is just that. It is no less real. It is no less tangible than somebody waiting on a counselling session, you know, or waiting on some kind of practical self-development work, or waiting for a day out that they know they're going to enjoy, that is going to help them to get more of a sense of perspective. For me, communing with deity, communing with spirit, working magic, or just bringing all of my power back to me so it's mine, so I'm whole in it. Those things that I do as a witch, where I connect to the majesty of energy and the majesty of what I can actually do with the power of my mind and my spirit and my energy and my being, that stuff to me is no less clear and tangible of a solution as anything that you could do in a more earthly and less spiritual way, if that makes sense. My altar, sacred space, my practice, they are not designed to foist out emotions like anger and stress and frustration. They are not designed to take me away from it, or to help me to turn from it, or to help me to suppress it. They are not the other end of the spectrum, you know. So when I'm doing my spiritual stuff, I feel peaceful and validated and completely satisfied and devoid of ego and devoid of paranoia. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, when I'm stressed and I'm upset and I feel terrible, or, you know, then those times I can't witch, I can't be spiritual. It's not like that for me. It's not like that for me. The circle can encompass everything that is the case. I have been known to sleep in sacred space. I have been known to actually just create a little bed with some cushions and pillows and a blanket, and just in my exhaustion, in my desperation, in my sense of loss and hopelessness, I have literally created a womb. I have drawn sacred space around a place to just sleep, and I've actually experienced some really awesome dreams which have fed into my shadow work process and my process of release afterwards. I've also been known to make a pot of tea and just carve out sacred space and sit with Goddess. I call it taking tea with the Goddess, and I'll probably do a whole video on that at some other point to show you more about what that entails and how I do it. Because I'm feeling a little bit less precious about some of the things that I do in sacred space and some of the things that I do in magic. I know people do ask a lot of questions have been asking a lot of questions for a long time about my art magic and other bits and pieces, and I've always felt a little bit like precious about those things and very protective over some of the things that I do. But I think I more or less know where my boundaries are now, and I'm prepared to kind of help people to understand a little bit more about what I do that helps and what I do that works. Sometimes just lighting incense and putting on a scent that you connect to your own sense of your empowerment, or your connection that you have with a matron or a guide or an idol of some kind, an archetype that you favour or you're working with, anything like that, or just sitting and drawing a few cards, anything can help you. And you don't need to have a grand plan, you don't need to have everything all worked out, you do not need to do a ritual if you do not have the energy to design a ritual, you do not need to do spell work if you do not feel like it is an opportune moment to do it. But I really feel like just connecting with that witch within you, that axis mundi, that omphalos that exists in your own personal Delphi, your own personal centre of your own personal biosphere. That is so potent, and so much begins from there, just begins from that moment. The circle is a safe space from which to process even the most ugly and the most terrifying of emotions. It's unbelievable the way tears come forth even when you weren't expecting them. It's unbelievable the insights that you can receive once you have set up that space, or once you are just gazing at your altar, or just sitting alone and just connecting with your sense of empowerment as a witch, as a magical being, as a spiritual being, as a mystic, as a sage, as a seeker, as a searcher. I know that I do put a lot of emphasis on sacred space, however it may surprise you to know that I do not draw out sacred space for every little thing. I don't always draw out sacred space for my devotionals. I don't draw out space to consecrate the altar or burn incense all of the time. It totally depends what I feel is necessary. I feel that for me, sacred space is one of those things that I will always create in order to do any kind of intense shadow work, release work, to get right with myself, and of course also to do spell work and to do more heightened forms of ritual. I kind of just want to say for the record that sacred space, your mileage will vary with it for definite, and I definitely don't think it's something that every single witch should not be allowed to call themselves a witch unless they actually carve out and unless they actually kind of have a connection to. That's not how I feel at all. But for me, the circle is an ever increasingly huge part of my own practice, so it would be silly for me personally not to mention it when I'm talking about my own practice and how I connect shadow work to the circle and the altar. Somebody mentioned on Facebook a while ago that they didn't feel like they had the room to carve out sacred space, and what would I say about that? And my answer was, in fact I'll read you the answer that I wrote. Okay, so Sue said, thank you for this. I've never cast a circle. I feel like I don't have room where my altar is. Thoughts? And I said, the circle is energetic, not physical. Therefore, I would cast a circle right in the middle of a rubbish dump surrounded by random shit, or in the cupboard under the stairs, or in a public toilet. But I admit that it took me a long time to get into that frame of mind. I definitely used to feel that I needed clear space on all sides of me to cast. I often used to actually avoid the process of walking around and physically visualising exactly where the circle was to be laid out. Instead, I used to close my eyes and visualise myself somewhere else, such as a forest clearing or a massive white room, and then visualise the circle forming around me. For some, this would not be considered an effective method for shielding and for maintaining the magical energy, but for me it worked perfectly. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is, if you don't have the physical space to cast the size of circle that you feel that you need, and there's like there's walls in the way, or there's stuff in the way, or you just don't feel like you have the actual physical space needed in order to do the creative visualization of the energetic space that you're trying to create, then don't force it if you really can't force it. I would definitely go for just visualizing it in your head, taking yourself somewhere else, like a forest clearing or something of that nature, and then actually just visualizing it around you. That might really work for you, and it definitely worked for me. You can also experiment with different ways of creating sacred space, but I'll get into that in another video because I guess it's not strictly on topic. But I can definitely see myself in the not too distant future doing some just really fucking rambly videos where I talk about a lot of different stuff in one video. That's something that I do feel kind of moved to do recently, and I don't know whether or not that's a really bad idea because I am exceptionally loquacious and it might go on all night. But yeah, let me know what you think. Obviously there are going to be lots of videos on various different topics that I'm going to be putting out, but I mean rambly videos that cover a lot of different stuff. What do we think, yay or nay? Because I do tend to find that I think of something and I'm talking on that subject, but there's other things that I do want to bring in that I know would also be be interesting to witches or to spiritual people, but it's not strictly on the same topic, but I kind of want to flow and I want to riff. I have toyed on and off with the idea of making a separate channel for that kind of thing, for more free-flowing, not very structured kind of things, but nah, in a way I just think everything should be kept in one place. So let me know what you think, what your votes are. Of course I'm going to go ahead and do whatever the fuck I want anyway, because that's how I roll, but I'd love to know, I'd love to get your input and your feedback and get to know what you personally think would be a good idea. And to prevent this one from getting too much more rambly, I'm going to say that I hope that I have made my point adequately. I just feel like it's a starting point, and never to discredit it and never to discount it. Don't discount sacred space, sabbats, esbats, any kinds of festivals, the 8 Spoke Wheel of the Year or any other festivals that you mark. Don't discount your time doing devotionals or meditations, or your altar space, as valid places for your anger, your stress, your confusion, your frustration, your disappointment, your sense of loss, your sense of grief, your sense of alienation. All of those things are absolutely a part of your practice. They can be brought into your practice, they can be processed inside the incredibly strong and incredibly safe energetic environment of the circle, and in many ways that is what it was designed for, just as much as it was designed for your joy and your empowerment and your autonomy and your sense of liberation and the things that you want to manifest that are so gorgeous and full of wonderment. Just as much as it was designed for those things, why would you ever think that it's not designed to hold your most negative feelings, your most painful experiences, the times when you feel like you're most lost? Those are the times when the circle is imperative. Those are the times where the witch archetype can be strongest within you. And I know there was this spate of videos that went around a while ago about witching through your bad times, and I know, like, I think it was Lady Gravedancer that made the original video, and it just became this massive discussion with interesting points on both sides, which I mean, I didn't have a dog in that fight, I didn't throw my hat into that particular ring, but I definitely watched with interest a lot of the different ideas. And I would say that maybe one of the reasons that people feel like they can't witch through their bad times is because they tell themselves that being a witch and doing witchy stuff and practicing witchcraft is to do with planning something out, getting the structure to it, getting all the tools together for it, building up the energy for it, preparing for it, and then doing it. And it's like this very overblown, quite ceremonial, quite amplified way of witching, if you will, if we're going to use witch as a verb, which it is, then, you know, I think people get scared off, because when you are confused and you're low energy and your mood is low and you don't know how you feel from one moment to the next, the thought of doing something which is structured, which involves planning and which involves like a delicate execution and a heightened use of your cognitive abilities, that seems like way too much. That seems like too much, you know, that seems like a lot. So I can understand why some people might back away from it and be like, well, I don't have the energy now to foist my intention towards this thing. I don't have the energy to gather it all together and cast a circle and do this ritual or do this spell work. It's just a lot on top of everything that I'm already doing. But I feel like witching through it doesn't have to just be about creating these very ornate, overblown spells and, you know, getting the ingredients together and really focusing and heightening your focus and heightening your concentration and then making something happen. It doesn't just need to be about that. It can literally be about carving out sacred space and then dealing with your motherfucking shit in that sacred space. Like, take care of your business, take care of your personal development, take care of your self-care. Listen to your intuitive insights, pull yourself away from the drama, from the bullshit that's going on, and carve out sacred space in which to be one with yourself as a witch and listen to the wisdom that's already knelling like a bell inside of you and trying to break through to the surface. Listen to your gods, listen to your guides, listen to your own inner wisdom. Listen to the archetype of the mystic that swims through the sea of the collective unconscious, through aeons, through civilizations, through different religions and destinies and guises, and it lives within you too, and it lives within me. The seed of it lives within all of us. That stuff you can get to in sacred space. That stuff you can get to at your altar. You don't need necessarily to cast a spell to make it all go away. Sometimes that's not what it's about. But you can definitely witch through it. There's 101 ways to witch through it, and if you're not doing that, then I would agree, yeah, you need to be. You need to be. It's the absolute starting point, the strong foundation from which the kingdom of your healing can be built ultimately. So I hope that I've managed to put that across, and Yeah, so much love and blessed new moon. And I hope for those of you doing any kind of new moon ritual, it is intense and profound. And if the tears come, I hope they wash away a multitude of ills. And so much love, blessed be.